Have you ever noticed how some organizations just seem to, naturally innovate while others get completely stuck in the mud? Across the globe, businesses have been facing what you might call a quiet innovation crisis. They're struggling to stand out, struggling to differentiate. And for the longest time, everyone thought the magic fix was just better marketing or, faster engineering. But recently, there's been a massive paradigm shift. The actual solution is design. But I'm not talking about just making things look pretty at the very end of an assembly line. I'm talking about wiring design into the actual DNA of your business strategy. Okay, let's dive into this.
Welcome to The Explainer. Now, if you've spent even 5 minutes in the modern business, tech, or product development worlds, you've absolutely been bombarded by these 3 terms: design thinking, service design, and user experience, or UX. People throw them around all the time, like they're the ultimate magic wands for every business problem. But the truth is, their real power is rarely understood, and the lines between them get super blurry. So today, we're going to unpack these critical concepts. We'll separate the buzzwords from the actual methodology and show you exactly how they fit together into one unified, incredibly powerful ecosystem.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We're covering the design thinking shift, then we'll look backstage at service design, front stage at user experience, how we map the contact points, the iterative process, and finally, the new bidirectional model.
Let's start with part 1, the design thinking shift.
For decades, an industrial designer's role was almost entirely tactical. They were literally just brought in at the very end to slap a nice-looking shell onto a product that the engineers had already finished. But as companies hit that innovation crisis we just talked about, that role radically changed from a late-stage add-on to an absolute strategic necessity. So what actually is design thinking? Well, it's a holistic, anthropocentric, meaning human-centered, approach. You're not just staring at an isolated product, you're looking comprehensively at the whole human context around a problem. And honestly, this mindset existed in great inventors way before the term was even coined in the 80s. Think about the folks who invented the railroad or the steam engine. They couldn't just invent one physical item, they had to build massive complex systems. Design thinking basically takes that brilliant, natural, inventive instinct and turns it into a systematic, repeatable method.
And this brilliantly illustrates how it works in practice. It's 5 sequential stages. You start with empathize, really getting into the shoes of the user. Then you define the core problem based on those actual human needs. Next, you ideate to come up with wild, creative solutions. You build a prototype to make it real, and finally, you test it to get user feedback. The designer here isn't just a solo artist. They're an empathetic coordinator, guiding a super collaborative process.
Moving right along to part 2, backstage service design.
To really grasp this, let's use a theater analogy. When you go see a Broadway play, there is a massive amount of frantic coordination happening totally out of sight just to make the show look effortless. In a business, managing that backstage is what we call service design. So the crucial point is that this practice transforms the invisible, messy internal workflows into a highly structured system. You are deliberately organizing your people, your infrastructure, your communication, and your materials. Why? So the final delivery of your product goes off without a single hitch while remaining super efficient for the business itself.
Let's move to and see how this builds into section 3, front stage, user experience.
Now we're stepping out from behind the curtain and right onto the front stage. This is where the customer actually lives and interacts with you. Donald Norman actually introduced the term user experience back in the 90s to describe design that intensely focuses on a user's subjective needs. Now, somewhere along the way, people started thinking UX just meant digital screens, like apps or websites, but Norman's actual definition goes way, way beyond digital. It's about a person's entire experience. It's studying their behaviors and emotions to solve their needs so they get maximum satisfaction with the absolute least amount of effort, whether they're clicking a button on a screen or physically unboxing a product in their living room.
Section 4, mapping the contact points.
So, a great question to ask here is how do the backstage and the front stage actually communicate? Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly it visualizes that exact intersection. Look at that timeline right in the center. Above the line, you have the front stage, the user experience. Below the line, you have the backstage, the service design. Every single time a person interacts with your business, boom, a contact point is generated right on that timeline. It's the literal intersection where your internal processes collide with the human's experience.
And these contact points don't just magically happen at the checkout counter. It's a whole timeline. Pre-purchase, it's ads, late-night internet research, or word of mouth. During the purchase, it's the point of sale or talking to a rep. And post-purchase, which is so often forgotten, it's the guarantees, the support calls, the surveys. Sometimes these are generated by the company, like an ad, and sometimes by the customer, like an angry tweet. But here is the kicker. The sum of all these interactions shapes the total, undeniable opinion a user forms about your brand.
Which brings us to Section 5, the iterative process. So how do we actually perfect those touchpoints? By embracing trial and error. I honestly love this concept because it completely flips how we look at mistakes. Iterating means you build a prototype, test it, and get feedback, period. Failing early is not a mistake, it's a deliberate learning mechanism. As the quote here points out, the faster you find your weaknesses, the faster you fix them. It ensures you're actually solving a real human need before you spend millions launching a product nobody wants.
Finally, Section 6, the new bidirectional model. Okay, we're going to bring all these concepts crashing together now. Look at the stark visual contrast here. At the bottom, you have the old, traditional, linear process. It's a rigid, one-way street from having an idea to making it to launching it. You're just marching forward. But up top, that's the modern bidirectional process. It uses the design thinking stages, but look at the arrows. The information is flowing in loops. It's completely wrapped up in user experience on top and service design on the bottom. The old sequence has been entirely replaced by a dynamic, living system.
To quickly summarize why this is such a big deal, the old linear model was a one-way pipeline, where design was just a late-stage tactical checkpoint. The bidirectional model is all about two-way communication and constant feedback loops. It seamlessly stitches the front stage of UX with the backstage of service design. This means an organization can constantly step back, look at the data, and make way better decisions. And that right there is exactly how you solve the business innovation crisis.
Well, that brings us to the end of our explainer, but hopefully it's just the start of your own strategic shift. We've seen how tearing down the wall between your messy internal processes and your customer's experience is the absolute key to real innovation. So I want to leave you with this. Look at the systems currently hiding behind the curtain in your own work. How will you rethink your organization's backstage to completely transform your users' front stage experience? Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep iterating.